Hi, everybody. Thank you for joining. We're going to go ahead and give folks a couple of minutes to join in here, and we'll get started promptly at 8:05. Thank you. Good evening, SHPE Familia, and welcome to the 2020 Scholarship Webinar Series. We are so excited to present the third of our four-part webinar series. As you know, scholarship applications are now open and available by visiting ship.org, clicking on the student header in the main menu, and then navigating to the scholarship link. The purpose of this webinar is to walk you through writing your essays for your scholarship application. Before we get started, some housekeeping. If you have any questions for us, please feel free to send them through the Ask a Question box. We'll be answering questions at the end of the session if time permits. A script with all the questions and answers will be posted on our webpage after this webinar has been concluded. This PowerPoint deck will also be posted. And lastly, I'd like to encourage you to share today's webinar with your social networks, including Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, or Twitter. We want to ensure that everyone has an equal opportunity to submit a Rockstar application to our program. So without further ado, let's get started. I'm Esther Gonzalez, your moderator and the Scholarship Program Manager. I am your go-to person for any questions you have regarding our scholarship program. This includes application questions, requirements, and technical issues. I have listed my email here, and you can contact me at any time. You may find the answer to your question on our scholarship webpage, so be sure to check there first. I have the pleasure of introducing our guest speaker, Dr. Erica Silva. Dr. Erica Silva is an instructional specialist in the Monrovia Unified School District, where she leads a team of teachers to enhance their teaching practice, professional development, and mentorship. She is a double Trojan and graduated with her doctorate in educational leadership from the Rossier School of Education at the University of Southern California. Erica discovered her passion for education working with college and high school students through the Norman Topping Student Aid Fund at USC. There, Erica worked in the outreach and recruitment process of the scholarship program, where she helped high school and college students navigate the application process for the scholarship fund. She has taught in both district and charter schools, giving her firsthand knowledge of the strengths and challenges that our education system faces every day. Erica is passionate about education equity, empowering communities through education, and increasing the representation of minorities in leadership positions. So we are very lucky to have an industry expert share her knowledge with us today. But before I hand things over to Erica, we will conduct a poll to get to know more about our audience. And we have two questions today. I'm going to go ahead and launch the first question and give everybody about 30 seconds to answer. And I'll be closing the poll in 3, 2, 1. So it looks like almost half of our attendees are in undergrad, and the remainder are split between high school and graduate level. So thank you for answering that poll for us. And the next question I'm going to go ahead and launch now is asking if this is your first time applying to our scholarship program. Okay. And it looks like everyone on the call today is a first-time applicant. So thank you so much for joining. We're really excited to be able to share this information with you, and hopefully you'll be better equipped to apply to our scholarships. So now I will go ahead and hand it over to Erica. to share her content with us today. Erica, are you there?
I'm here, yeah. I was muted for some reason. Hi, everybody. Welcome. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. I appreciate you taking the time, and I'm really looking forward to being able to just share some really digestible and quick tips in order for you to write a really effective scholarship application essay. Like Esther said, I worked for a scholarship application for several years, and so in doing that, I read hundreds and hundreds of applications, and so I want to be able to communicate how you can be able to highlight your strengths in an essay to get the attention of the interview committee. So the purpose of our time together today is thinking about how can we write a really effective essay for a scholarship. So we're going to talk through how can you be an authentic candidate and effectively communicate your story by writing a really interesting and compelling essay that grabs the attention of the reader. Because again, the most important thing that you want to think about is how can I stand out amongst hundreds, if not thousands of applicants? That there really is a science to being able to boil down and communicate your story in a very authentic and concise manner. So some of the typical essay questions that you might see in terms of lots of different scholarships kind of center around a couple different themes. So the first one is any committee always wants to know your life experience and any challenges that have impacted your path to higher education. This is something that I'm really passionate about and something that has informed my work. And so it's really important that you're able to concisely summarize what a scholarship committee is looking for. So we're going to talk and kind of dig through that today, thinking about how have those experiences, right, impacted your educational and your career aspirations, how to effectively describe your interests, and then being able to highlight strategically volunteer and community service experience so that you are looked upon as a candidate who is proactive, who is passionate about what they do, and who is interested in moving forward in their career. So before we get into that, I really want to take some time to focus on our why. A lot of times we just go into the nuts and bolts with a scholarship essay where we start to talk about, I've done this, this, and this is why I should receive the scholarship. But really what a committee is looking for is somebody who has a lot of purpose in doing what they do. And so it's your job as the scholarship applicant to be able to effectively communicate your why to a larger audience. And that really takes some deep digging for us to be able to understand and grapple with. And that's kind of, a different way of going about writing an essay, but I can guarantee you that these effective essays are ones that address these in a certain order. You focus on why do you do what you do, and what is your purpose? What is your purpose for either advancing into your career, choosing your chosen occupation, your major? And how have your life experiences informed that? And then you want to be able to communicate how do you do what you do? And then well, what is it specifically that you do? All of you here tonight are engineers, right? But we need to know why did you decide to become an engineer? There were certain experiences in your life that led you to that. And so it's important that you are able to communicate that clearly to an audience, because that's going to really root them and help you stand out in a scholarship application. So I want us to take a moment. I kind of want to just frame our work with the work of Simon Sinek. He has a great presentation on the golden circle. And so I'm going to play a short clip from that. And then what we're going to do after that is kind of discuss some of the nuts and bolts of how to be able to communicate what he's talking about in this video to writing an essay. All right, so we're going to go ahead and just watch a short clip here. And as we watch the clip, really pay attention to why he's communicating the way he is.
I call it the golden circle. Why, how, what? This little idea explains why some organizations and some leaders are able to inspire where others aren't. Let me define the terms really quickly. Every single person, every single organization on the planet knows what they do 100%. Some know how they do it, whether you call it your differentiating value proposition or your proprietary process or your USP.
So here, when we're talking here, right, we all know, especially those of you who are engineers, right, you're an engineer, right? And then the how is like the type of engineer, like what you are studying to become. But we really want to think about like the why. Why did you choose to go down this extremely rigorous and challenging career path? We want to know that from a scholarship standpoint.
Very, very few people or organizations know why they do what they do. And by why, I don't mean to make a profit. That's a result. It's always a result. By why, I mean, what's your purpose? What's your cause? What's your belief? Why does your organization exist? Why do you get out of bed in the morning? And why should...
So I want you to think about, right, why are you deciding to apply for the scholarship? Why are you thinking about going into this specific field? Why are you working so hard every single day to be able to contribute to society in this way, right? We want to root ourselves in that, answering that question and communicating it clearly to a committee.
Should anyone care? Well, as a result, the way we think, the way we act, the way we communicate is from the outside in. It's obvious. We go from the clearest thing to the fuzziest thing. But the inspired leaders and the inspired organizations, regardless of their size, regardless of their industry, all think, act, and communicate from the inside out. Let me give you an example. I use Apple because they're easy to understand and everybody gets it. If Apple were like everyone else, a marketing message from them might sound like this. We make great computers. They're beautifully designed, simple to use, and user-friendly. Want to buy one? Meh. And that's how most of us communicate. That's how most marketing is done. That's how most sales is done. And that's how most of us communicate interpersonally. We say what we do. We say how we're different or how we're better. And we expect some sort of behavior, a purchase, a vote, something like that. Here's our new law firm. We have the best lawyers with the biggest clients. We have, we always perform for our clients, do business with us. Here's our new car. It gets great gas mileage. It has, leather seats. Buy our car. But it's uninspiring.
So let's apply this to thinking about what a scholarship is looking for, right? So a lot of times what I see students do in an essay is that they begin saying, I believe that I'm qualified for the scholarship because I worked really hard. I decided to become an engineer because, I really enjoy science and math, and that's why I want to do this type of work, right? But what is that missing, right? It's missing purpose. It's missing like, what was the thing that motivated you to enter that field? That's what you want to start communicating. So you have to start off with a why in order for your essay to stand out from everybody else's, or else what you run the risk of doing is having an essay that sounds like a laundry list of, I was in this club and this club and this club, I participated in these organizations, these are the things that I did, and now this is why I feel that I'm deserving of the scholarship, right? You got to root yourself in your why.
All right. Here's how Apple actually communicates. Everything we do, we believe in challenging the status quo. We believe in thinking differently. The way we challenge the status quo is by making our products beautifully designed, simple to use, and user-friendly. We just happen to make great computers. Want to buy one? Totally different, right? You're ready to buy a computer from me. All I did was reverse the order of the information. What it proves to us is that people don't buy what you do, people buy why you do it. People don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it. This explains why every single person in this room is perfectly comfortable buying a computer from Apple. But we're also perfectly comfortable buying an MP3 player from Apple, or a phone from Apple, or a DVR from Apple. But as I said before, Apple's just a computer company. There's nothing that distinguishes them structurally from any of their competitors. Their competitors are all equally qualified to make all of these products. In fact, they tried. A few years ago, Gateway came out with flat screen TVs. They're eminently qualified to make flat screen TVs. They've been making flat screen monitors for years. Nobody bought one. And Dell came out with MP3 players and PDAs. And they make great quality products, and they can make perfectly well-designed products, and nobody bought one. In fact, talking about it now, we can't even imagine buying an MP3 player from Dell. Why would you buy an MP3 player from a computer company? But we do it every day. People don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it.
So again, people don't buy what you do, they buy why you're doing it. And so I want us to really consider that question as we move forward into talking about what are some specific tools and strategies that you can do to make your essay very effective. So one of the things that, again, is that we want to think about knowing yourself and your purpose. Why are you doing what you're doing? So for example, for myself, I am an instructional specialist. That means that I work in classrooms with students and teachers in reading and writing and math. But that's not my why, right? That's what I do. How I do it is I am in classrooms coaching teachers on a daily basis to help them improve their practice. But again, that's not my purpose. My purpose is to close the achievement gap and to be able to propel more students of color into higher education, right? That's my purpose. And so when you're able to distinguish your purpose from your what and your how, right? Now a committee is compelled to be able to think about, okay, well, this person really, I want to invest in this person because this person is very purposeful in all the steps they have been taking in their professional career, because we can see where they're going, right? We want to make sure that you're able to do that. The second thing that you want to think about is take the opportunity to be vulnerable with the scholarship committee. I cannot stress how important this is. And there are two things here that I want you to also consider, right? Vulnerability means being open and honest about your experiences. It's not exaggerating them, but it's framing them in a way that communicates like, I have gone through this experience, and this experience changed me, gave me a different perspective, or also allowed me to think about a problem or a solution differently, right? You have to be able to be vulnerable with a committee in talking about, this is an experience that I went through, but then this is what I learned from it. A lot of times students just talk about an experience. So for example, if somebody, I've read a lot of essays where people talk about, you know, the community that they grew up in, right? But if you're not talking about the community that you're framing, the community that you grew up in a way that talks about how it informs your work, right? Then you're just kind of really giving the scholarship committee information without any context. So for example, a lot of students could say, you know, I went to a high school that was underserved, and I didn't have the resources to become, to really excel in my math and science classes, right? But you're not saying how that is motivating you to be able to give back to your community. Maybe that experience has given you things to think about in terms of, wow, I really saw how important it was for me to have role models of color. And so now as a future engineer, I want to be able to do that and give back to my community, right? That's how you're going to be able to link your purpose with vulnerability, right? You're talking about like the experiences that you had while growing up, right? Or maybe an experience that you had in the workplace or an experience that you had at school. But then you're talking about how is it informing your next steps? That's important because you want to be able to know yourself, communicate your purpose, and then be vulnerable and honest with the committee, because that's going to set you aside. That's going to set you aside and help you stand out amongst a pile of applications. Also, remember that in a scholarship process, the readers of the applications are reading hundreds of essays. So when I worked at the scholarship committee, they would get a huge yellow envelope, and that envelope would have over 50 essays per reader, and they might have multiple envelopes. And so out of that pile, right, they're reading essay after essay after essay. And so when students are just talking about a laundry list of things that they have done, that is that sounds very it's rinse and repeat. But when you have somebody who's really rooting themselves in their purpose and why they're doing what they're doing, then those essays always make it to the maybe stack or the wow, this kid really stood out to me. I want to meet this person at least for an interview. The next thing I want you to think about is how can you align your essay to the mission and vision of the organization that you're applying to? This could apply to the scholarships that you're currently applying to or ones in the future. So you always need to do your research, right? Like, what is the purpose of the organization? If you don't know the purpose of the organization, you're not going to be able to align your prompt to what's going to speak to their values, right? So if you're applying to a scholarship, right, that is about empowering students of color into different types of careers, but you're not talking about how that is important to you and how you would take advantage of that opportunity, right? You're not aligning your work with the values of that organization. So you always want to make sure that you're hitting on and doing your research on the purpose of that organization and addressing it in your essay. The next thing that I want you to think about is answering the prompt. I know that this sounds very simple, but you would have no idea how many students go on tangents or their essay is convoluted or confusing because they're not fully answering the question or they were going to run out of space. So then they write like the end, just kind of leaves you at a cliffhanger. You want to make sure that your essay is thoughtful and really is communicating to the reader that you took the time to write this essay. I have seen essays before where students have forgotten to change the organization that they're applying to. And so then it will say one school when they're actually applying to a different school, right? You don't want to do that. You never want to just rinse and repeat a different essay. You want to make sure that, again, you're tailoring it to the organization and you're carefully proofreading. Think about it. When you are sitting as a reviewer, one day many of you will participate in the same process, right? And you're proofreading, if you're reading an essay and you have two people who stood out to you, the one that has no errors in their essay is going to be the one that's chosen, even if you both have a compelling story. And here's why. A committee wants to know that the person that they are selecting invested time into applying for the scholarship and took the diligence and the time and the care to make sure that they were honoring this process. If you have an essay that's full of misspellings or formatting issues or you didn't follow the directions carefully, that's communicating to the committee that you are not committed to this process, right? And you want to make sure that you give no opportunities for the committee to doubt your intentions. So again, answer the prompt fully and proofread it. It's always important to have a second set of eyes or a third set of eyes, especially after you've been writing several essays. You want to give it to someone, one, in your field, right, who might understand some of the language that you're using, but then you also want to be able to give it to somebody who's maybe not in your field and make sure that your message is still coming across the way you want it to. And so having two different perspectives is always very helpful. So again, answer the prompt and make sure that you're proofreading and using multiple people to provide you feedback. The last thing that I want to talk about is demonstrating a growth mindset and connecting it to your purpose. So again, earlier we talked about like knowing your why, right? And knowing and talking about like how you do it and the what. But again, knowing your purpose. The one thing that helps students stand out in a scholarship essay is when you can connect your purpose and your life experiences to I have learned something because of this. The idea of a growth mindset is that you're continuously learning. We don't have fixed mindsets, right? You're always learning and growing and improving. When you come across to a committee that you have all the answers or you already know where you're going and are not open to feedback and mentorship and all of those important things that are essential to growing as a professional, but you want to make sure that you're thinking about that. So for example, if you're writing an essay and it's asking you, so if we go back to the the first question, right? Your life experiences and any challenges that have impacted your path to higher education. If we go forward to connecting that to your purpose, right? So, for example, if you were to say, there were limited offerings at my high school for the courses and the topics that were interesting to me. So I sought out mentors and organizations that were able to help me. And this is how I engaged with those things. These are the opportunities that I was able to come across. And then, if you had some type of hardship or something that you had to overcome, you can say, I learned X because of these experiences. This has informed my view on blank, right? You want to make sure that you're showing that through that experience that you were able to grow, learn from it, and that it's connecting back to your why. So important. So I know that you guys want to also talk about, what are some good tips on an essay, right? Like, how can you structure your essay so that it's effective? And let's say you have limited words. So sometimes you'll have essays. I know that these ones that I posted were asking for about 250 words, which is not that much, right? So you want to make sure that you have an introduction, right? And a catchy hook. A hook is like something that's going to draw the reader in. Then you maybe want to include a brief story that showcases your vulnerability, right? So when we think about vulnerability, we're thinking about like, what are any lessons that I've learned, challenges I've overcome, and how you were able to do that, right? And when you can connect those things to your purpose, then you have now created a picture of the type of person that you are, right? A person with a growth mindset, a person that's able to overcome challenges, a person who can learn from different types of experiences, right? That sets students apart more than an essay that talks about all the things on their resume, right? You want to think about your reviewers probably already have your resume or ask for some type of resume on your application. So they can go and look at all the clubs that you were in and the duties that you had. But you want to be able to highlight maybe one of those things, showcase what you learned from that, and connect it to your purpose. That's where they start to paint the picture of, oh, wow, this student really has a deep understanding of themselves and really is interested in moving their career forward. And again, at the end of your essay, you want to think about what is it you want the committee to know about you, right? You could have had a catchy hook, you could have had a brief story, you could have connected to your purpose. But again, remember, your interviewer or your scholarship reader is reading hundreds of essays. And so there is some fatigue in that because all the essays start to sound the same after a while because students don't know how to write an essay that sets themselves apart. So you want to make sure before you before you close out your essay that you have a really concise conclusion about this is what I did, this is what I learned, and this is what I am hoping to contribute to this organization, or this is what I'm hoping to be able to use this scholarship in order to move me forward in my purpose, right? Do you start to see how all of these things can really create a very concise, nice package where now the reader has a clear picture of who you are as a person. They understand why you have chosen to do what you do. You have shown them that you can be vulnerable and honest in your life experiences, and you can talk about what you learned through that and how it's informed your work. So those are some tips on essay structure. And again, I can't emphasize enough that even if you were to do all those things, but don't take the care and the time to proofread and really make sure that your sentences are concise and that they're not run-ons, or that you're using language that maybe you wouldn't use normally, right? You just want to think about it as creating a conversation and a dialogue with the reader, not trying to impress them with fancy words or vocabulary. Some of the most effective essays can also be the ones that are the most simple. So those are some of the things that I had, some of the key tips that I wanted you to kind of take away from tonight in terms of how to structure your essay. I definitely want to make sure that I have time to answer any specific questions that you have on what we talked about this evening. I'm going to turn it over to Esther for some announcements, and then we'll go into questions and answers.
Thank you, Erica. Thank you for sharing all of those wonderful tips. I'm sure our students are definitely going to benefit from your insights. So at this point, we are going to open it up to questions, and you can type your questions in the questions box on your webinar menu. But before I start reading any questions that we may have, I did want to remind everybody that next week is our last webinar from our scholarship application webinar series, and it's the Wow What a Letter webinar, and it will be led by Dr. Kimberly Douglas Mankin, who is our senior program director with SHPE, and she will actually walk through the way answering candidly your questions about how to request a letter of recommendation, the do's and don'ts, who to ask, who is an appropriate person to write your letter, and what can you send your recommenders so that way they are best prepared to write an awesome recommendation letter for you. So at this point, we have a few questions here. And the first is a logistical one. If I graduate in May and start a master's in the fall, am I still eligible? The answer is yes, and that will be for a graduate scholarship that you would be eligible for. And the next question is, can you emphasize a little more in vulnerability and give another example of this, please? Erica, can you address that question?
Absolutely, that's a great question. So I'm going to go ahead and use an example from a scholarship essay that I wrote for myself. So when I was applying to my doctorate program, I applied for a $25,000 Toyota scholarship, and I had never gotten a scholarship that big before, and I didn't think that I was going to even get it. But I went ahead and I thought, okay, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to write my essay. So I started writing my essay about, you know, why I decided to become a teacher and why I was pursuing education. But then when I thought about it, I started thinking about, man, like I really need to be a little more vulnerable in this essay. And so I had to talk about in the essay, it asked me about a life experience that has informed my work, right? Or has informed me applying to graduate school. So what that meant is that I had to be really honest about how I got to the decision to go to grad school. And so I shared with the committee that I had actually decided to apply to law school. And I had been in the process of applying to law school. And then I had a relationship that didn't work out, that was very challenging for me to overcome. And I had quit my teaching job. I had decided that I was going to go to law school. I had told everybody that I was about to go to law school. And then I decided that I actually didn't want to go to law school, but I wanted to stay in education. And so that required a lot of courage on my part to be able to make that change and that flip. But not everybody would talk about that in a scholarship essay, right? Because I was, you know, I was hesitant to. I was like, man, should I really be vulnerable and tell them that like I wasn't sure about even applying to graduate school in the first place, that I wanted to be a lawyer and now I still want to be in education. But when I was able to really flesh that out, I was able to communicate with the committee, like, you know, in quitting my teaching job, in deciding that law school wasn't the right fit for me, and applying to a graduate program where I'm able to fulfill my purpose and closing the achievement gap and opening up more opportunities for students of color to be able to have options to apply to law school, graduate school, medical school by working in the education system. That, I think, is what set my essay apart for that scholarship. And so when I would talk about being vulnerable, it's important that you really are sharing those experiences in your life that have made you take a turn, that have made you change something that you thought about yourself, and that you learned from it and then you grew from it. And so I talked about to the committee how, you know, being flexible and being able to evolve with my purpose and what I wanted to do and being very honest with myself. That was something that I think set me apart. And so I ended up getting the $25,000 scholarship, and there was only one given that year. But again, being vulnerable means that you're able to communicate your purpose authentically. You're able to share not just what you have done, but why you are doing it. And you're able to talk about an experience, a life experience, whatever that means for you, whether that was a decision that you made, whether that was an experience that you had, maybe that was a class you took where you learned something or were challenged to think differently about something and had to grapple with that, right? It could be lots of different things, but you always want to be vulnerable with the committee and then show what did you learn from that. Does that answer the question to whoever asked that?
I think that was an excellent response. We'll wait to see.
Okay, I just want to make
we
sure
get
that
a message back.
Great.
Yes, but the next question that we have is from a high school student, and the question asks, and we just got a response, sorry, Erica, it says, yes, thank you very much.
Awesome.
So absolutely. So the next question is a high school student who is asking if these tips also work for applying to college. And is there any other advice you would have about starting the next chapter of starting college and preparing for their future?
That is a great question. And I'm for the high school students out there, I'm so proud of you that you are being really proactive and taking this time to really start applying to lots of scholarships, because it's going to make a huge difference. That's one thing that I wish I would have done more of as a high school student, is apply to scholarships early. So good for you. Yes, these tips apply to any type of opportunity that you're applying to, whether it's applying to college, applying to a scholarship, applying to a fellowship, applying to even a job, like in a cover letter sometimes, right? Like you maybe wouldn't want to share like all of those personal details in like a cover letter for a job, but you could talk about like how you are rooted in your purpose and your why, right? All of those things are really, really important when you're thinking about the types of things that readers want to see, right? You want to make that person to person, that human connection with whoever is reading your essay. And so I would absolutely encourage you to really explore your why, and your why might change and once you get to college, and that's okay. But whatever your why is for you right now will show the committee that you're reflective and that you're already thinking about like your purpose and the things that you want to do in the future. So yes, I would definitely use these tips for high school students. And these tips again were informed by the scholarships that I read from not only college students applying to graduate programs, but also high school students entering college at USC.
Thank you for sharing that, Erica. The next question, and this is a logistical one, are the SHPE scholarships open to undocumented and or documented students? And the answer to your question is yes. So SHPE funded scholarships, which are approximately, I think this year, about 40% of the scholarships that will be awarded and account for about at least 100 recipients are open to all students regardless of citizenship status. However, we do have corporate funded scholarships that may have additional requirements, and that is listed explicitly in the application if they are if citizenship is required. If citizenship is not listed as a requirement, then that means that it is open to everybody. Okay, next question here. Are there topics or experiences that are not appropriate, like talking about politics or any other controversial topics? Great question.
That's a really good question. So I think it's important, right, when I talked about earlier, knowing the mission and the vision of your organization, because if you don't understand the purpose of the scholarship that you're applying for, and you talk about a controversial topic that doesn't align to maybe what they're doing, then that could potentially rub a committee reader the wrong way, right? So unless you're talking about, I'm trying to think of a good example. So let's say that you're applying for a scholarship that is funded by a corporation, right? But then you write in your essay how you are anti-corporations because they don't help communities, right? That wouldn't be aligning your essay to the mission and the vision of that organization. And so you would want to rethink about how could you communicate your story or whatever examples that you want to use from your personal life in order to tailor it best to whatever scholarship that you're applying to. Yeah, so you do want to use some judgment and some care. And again, it's really, really important, even before you start writing an essay, this is for any type of thing that you'll apply to, you really, really want to do your research on the organization. You want to look at the mission, the vision, the company website. You want to look at all of their board, right? You want to look at who's on the board of that organization, because that will help paint a clearer picture for you on what their values are. And then you can start to align your responses to that organization. But great question.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing, Erica. So at this point, we don't have any more questions. We'll wait about another minute or so to see if any additional questions come in. So get them in now while you have us on the line.
And again, I know that it's hard sometimes when you're in a webinar and taking notes, and you're going to go back and look at review the presentation. So if you have other questions that you can't think of right now, please feel free to add me and reach out to me on LinkedIn and tell me that you were a part of the webinar, and I'm more than happy to dialogue with you offline about more questions that you have.
Okay, so we have one more question here. I am an ex-church member of a church that limited my ability to do community service until finally I asked my other parent to gain my custody. Then I was free to do community service. Does not having community service hurt my chances? So I'll talk a little bit about whether it will hurt your chances or not, and then I'll let Erica talk about how you can communicate that. So first, I would say that community service, in the traditional sense, when we think about it, community service, we think about beach cleanups, we think about mentoring people on campus, we think about a whole gamut of what community service looks like or traditionally looks like. But I'd encourage you to think about situations in which you went above and beyond for somebody else. And it may not be that you signed up to volunteer in with a specific organization, but it could mean that you stepped up in a situation in your regular daily life. So I would think about those kinds of situations, because I think everybody has had a situation where they've gone above and beyond for somebody else. And that being said, that will not harm, it will not hurt your chances if you don't list any community service, because your application is looked at holistically. But I would encourage you to think about those situations which may not be, what you normally associate with as far as community service, and speak to those. So Erica, do you want to share a little bit about how you could go about writing about that?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great question. And I want to commend the person who wrote that question for sharing. Thank you for your vulnerability. So I think that is a great example of being vulnerable with a committee about an experience that you went through that has, and what has taught you, right? So if it's a specific scholarship related to something that's about community involvement, and maybe that's something that you're passionate about but weren't able to necessarily access, right? You want to talk about that. And so you want to talk about like, how did that experience of not being able to participate in those types of activities, like how did that make you feel, right? How did it make you think differently about certain things? And right, you don't want to go down the negative route if that's something that you didn't agree with at the time. But what you want to do is talk about like, what did you learn from that experience? And now what types of opportunities are you interested in seeking in the future? in order to provide yourself with different perspectives and different points of view. And so if I think you're able to frame a challenge, right? Again, framing a challenge, talking about what it was briefly, don't go into like all the nitty gritty, but just briefly talk about what the challenge was, and then talking about how did you overcome that challenge, and then how did you grow from it, right? What did that teach you, and how has that experience informed the decisions that you're going to be making in the future that are connected to your career or the things that you want to be able to participate in the future. So again, that's a great example of how you can frame an experience into what you learned, how you've grown, and how that is informing your future decisions.
Thank you for sharing, Erica. I think that's definitely some great insights there. We have another question. Are there any tips you have for the 30 plus, I assume this means age, graduate students that haven't taken the traditional route, and how to showcase that?
So yeah, I think that you have so much life experience that has informed and gotten you to where you are at in your professional career. And so I would really encourage you to maybe not talk about all of the experiences that you've had, but maybe talk about one or two in particular that have launched you into this profession or this career path or this educational pursuit, and then frame it that way. So you don't want, again, talking about tons of years, but talk about maybe one or two experiences that shifted you into whatever it is that you're deciding to pursue in the future.
Okay, great. I think for whoever asked that question, I think they're at the graduate level, especially there's huge diversity in the types of applicants that we get and the life paths that have led to graduate studies. So although sometimes we have the impression that there's one way to get to graduate school, the reality is that there are a lot more than you may think. So thank you for asking that question. The next question is, could you please expand on the catchy hook for the introduction? Is it part of the brief story / vulnerability?
So there's two ways that you can approach that. And it depends on your writing style. So I didn't want to provide too many examples in terms of writing style because everybody has their own voice. But typically a hook is like maybe like a question that you ask. You could start it off with maybe a sentence that really paints a clear picture. What I mean by catchy hook is not a, hi, my name's Erica Silva and I'm interested in pursuing the scholarship, right? Those are the types of introductions that you want to avoid. What would be better is, for example, I knew that I wanted to become a teacher after the first day that I didn't go back to the classroom in September, right? That's a hook that's now drawing the reader in because they're like, wait, why did you still want to be a teacher if you were not going to the classroom, right? Then I would expand into the story about, that I had quit my teaching job in order to pursue law school, but then realized I wanted to be a leader in the field of education, right? So using a descriptive sentence is one way to be able to draw a reader in. Another way I've seen them done is maybe a person is asking a question or starts off with some type of some dialogue, maybe of a narrative that they've had with somebody. But again, I don't want to give too much advice in terms of like a writing style, but more as you can frame your purpose and your why in your introduction, but you want to be creative about it, right? You don't want to start your essay off with, I am interested in applying for the scholarship because you want to make sure that you're making it interesting for the reader because that's what's going to help you stand out.
So I think that question connects to our next question, especially around writing style. So the next question is, how serious do you have to be in the essay? If my way to communicate is in a funny way, is that acceptable?
I think it's really important. This is a great question. I think it's really important to have your voice come across in a scholarship. One of the things that you want to avoid, though, is like being too informal, right? So like LOL or any types of acronyms that a committee member might not know, or any type of shorthand, right? Like I know, KNO, right? Like those are things that I've seen before, right? Because the person is trying to be funny and set themselves apart, but actually it's not gonna work, right? But if you're funny and you're telling a story that's funny, or maybe you know, a joke, you're not sure. A joke might be a little hard because if it's coming across to the reader and they don't understand it in context, that could be difficult. So again, that goes back to the point with, if you want to be funny or you know, try to humor the reader a little bit, you want to have somebody read your essay, maybe 2 or 3 people, to see if your intent is matched with what you have written on the page. That's really important. So if you're trying to, you know, have a different type of style, make sure that you have multiple people provide you feedback to make sure that it's coming across in a way that is clear for the reader. Because sometimes if you try to be too unique in terms of like standing out by being funny or something, then it could confuse the reader ultimately. But again, you want to just approach it like you're having a conversation with somebody, right? It doesn't have to be like this overly formal essay, but you don't want to be too informal either, where it looks like you didn't take time to write the essay. So I hope that answers that question.
Thank you, Erica. So the next question that we have here is for students that live in rural communities where there was not a chance to work on science projects, but were able to read a lot of books. How can we substitute knowledge with experience?
I think that, again, that's part of your purpose and your why and your experience, right? So you can talk about in your essay, right, how living in a certain community really fueled you to be able to pursue seeking of knowledge, right? How did you get that knowledge? What was it like to do that, right? Was it researching on the internet? Was it going to the library? Was it dialoguing with a teacher or a professor who was influential to you, right? You want to think about, like, again, framing for the reader, how did that experience change you and help you pursue something that you were interested in, right? Seeking knowledge, again, like not everybody does that, right? Not everybody is passionate enough about what they do in order to be able to spend lots of time researching it. So I definitely think that you could communicate, you know, like, I really wanted to be an expert in this. I wasn't able to engage in these things because of X, Y, and Z, but this is how I went about it because I was so interested and compelled in knowing more. So absolutely, again, it's all about framing your experience with and linking it to your purpose and why you want to do what you do.
Thank you so much, Erica. And I think that's the last question for today. As previously mentioned, if you have any additional questions, you can reach out to Erica or myself, and we'll make sure that we get your questions answered. Thank you for joining us today, and we hope you'll join us again next week. Thank you and have a good evening.